Okay, this is how we're going to thicken the sauce for the short ribs. I've got cornstarch, and I have this demi-glace, which I may use if I feel it needs some more beef flavor. I've already got the sauce boiling, and it's much easier if you take any fat out of it that you want to take out using a separator or the refrigerator method before you do this. That way you're not binding in the fat with the cornstarch. So I've got it simmering, and you always have to, you want to give it a taste, and you want to just see what the consistency is. Now some people like a thin sauce, and that's perfectly fine. You really don't have to do this step. Also, alternatively, you can make a roux with flour and butter, but of course you're adding fat and some gluten and so forth from the flour, so you may or may not want to do it that way. This is fewer calories, and really I think it's just as good. Obviously you get a flavor hit from butter. Adding butter to anything is good, but everything in moderation. Anyway, the way you do the cornstarch is there's no real absolute measurement. I guess if you worked out a recipe and did it the same way every time, you could use exactly the same amount of cornstarch. But I'm just going to use, this is probably about a teaspoon and a half, and I'm going to add a little bit of water to it. And you add just enough water to make a slurry out of it. It'll be, the ideal thing would be to get it about the consistency of cream or half and half, but if you make it thinner, that's okay. It's just more water to boil off. So I've got it mixed in, and the important thing here is just to go in steps. So I'm going to just do 2 small spoonfuls in there and give it a stir. And I don't know if you can see that it's thickening there. It just has to boil for maybe 30 seconds to get the full thickening of that dose of cornstarch. So I can tell I'm going to want a little more. I'll probably use about all of this. In fact, I'm just going to go ahead and pour that in and stir it up. And so, of course, I could make it thicker, but to me this is about right, especially if I'm going to have the short ribs with noodles or mashed potatoes. I like to have a little more volume and have it a little bit looser. If I were just going to serve the sauce directly over the short ribs without flavoring or enhancing anything else with the sauce, I would reduce this more to concentrate the flavor, as opposed to just thickening it up more. So I'd probably take this down by another half or so. So the other thing you could do at this point, if you wanted more beef flavor in it, as I mentioned in the other segment, I'm going to avoid contaminating the demi-glace with a spoon that's been in other things, but just to show you, that's probably half a teaspoon to a teaspoon. Never hurts to put some in there. So that's going to richen it up a little bit more. And as I mentioned before also, I'm really going to wait until serving time to add some fresh herbs. I think they're much nicer if they don't get cooked through, they don't get frozen with the part that I freeze and so forth. It's just going to give it a nicer flavor. So I'm going to let this cook very low for another couple minutes just to make sure that the demi-glace I put in there gets blended in and melts all the way. And that's how it's done.